The Middle Ages were an age of faith and fear, where kingdoms rose and fell under the banners of religion. Candlelight maps of Europe and the Middle East marked fragile borders. Yet those lines would soon be redrawn by fire and steel. The story of the Crusades is more than a record of wars. It is the tale of belief and ambition, of empires colliding in the name of God. As dawn broke over Jerusalem, golden light crowned the dome of the rock. Birds soared above the holy city, whose stones had carried the prayers of Jews, Christians, and Muslims for centuries. It was here, in this city of eternal devotion, that destiny would ignite. Far away in Europe, word of Jerusalem's fate reached the ears of the powerful. In 1095, Pope Urban II stood before a sea of peasants and knights, his voice rising with divine authority. He declared that Christendom must rise, that those who bore the cross would be forgiven of their sins and promised paradise. The crowd erupted in thunderous cries. The Pope raised his cross high into the sunlight, the crowd surging with zeal. Knights vowed their lives, peasants swore their faith, and the age of the Crusades was born. Across Europe, warriors prepared. Iron clashed as swords were sharpened, chainmail fastened, and banners lifted to the sky. Every clang of steel carried both hope and dread. Armies marched across countryside roads, their banners snapping in the wind, rivers of faith flowing eastward toward the holy city. Maps were drawn and redrawn, showing arrows surging from the west toward the Holy Land. The journey was long, crossing mountains where snow crushed the weak and rivers nearly swept away the strong. Exhaustion, hunger, and disease claimed countless lives before the enemy was ever seen. Yet in the flickering candlelight of makeshift camps, knights prayed, planting their swords into the earth as they whispered for strength. For them, this was no conquest, it was salvation. At last, the towers and walls of Jerusalem rose before their weary eyes. An ocean of tents filled the hills outside the city. Anticipation thickened the air as catapults were wheeled into position. When the siege began, flaming rocks soared through the night sky, walls cracked under impact, and arrows whistled in swarms. The chaos of battle was deafening. Swords clashed in clouds of dust. Men fell screaming, and fire devoured the wooden gates. In 1099, the Crusaders stormed into Jerusalem. Triumph for some, devastation for others. The streets ran red, holy shrines burned, and the city groaned under the weight of conquest. But the Crusades were never only about faith. With each campaign, new trade routes opened. Ships carried spices, silks, and ideas between East and West. In Muslim cities, scholars worked under candlelight, copying ancient manuscripts, preserving the wisdom of Greece, and expanding knowledge in medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. As Christendom tightened its grip on Jerusalem, a new leader rose in the east. Al-ad-Din, Saladin, a man of faith and justice, united the fractured Muslim world. At dawn, his camps stirred with determination, soldiers sharpening blades, horses pawing the earth. His figure on horseback, clad in golden armor, became the symbol of a new resistance. When his cavalry charged, dust rose like a storm, lances leveled as thunder echoed across the plains. In 1187, the two sides met at Hattin. The air shimmered with heat, crusaders collapsed from thirst, and smoke blinded the battlefield. Surrounded and overwhelmed, the Crusader army was shattered. Saladin's victory was decisive. When Jerusalem fell into his hands, he raised his sword not in vengeance, but in triumph. Unlike the massacre of 1099, he allowed many to leave alive. His name echoed across the world, feared as a warrior, admired as a man of honor. The West could not ignore this loss. From across the sea came kings draped in armor. Richard the Lionheart of England, fierce and unyielding, led his knights into the deserts of the East. His banner rose against Saladin's, and their battles became legend. At Acre, at Arsuf, steel met steel, each clash sparking tales of both ferocity and respect. Though enemies, Richard and Saladin recognized greatness in one another. In time, they met not in battle, but in negotiation. Beneath the canvas of a grand tent, they forged a truce. Jerusalem would remain Muslim, but Christian pilgrims could enter in peace. It was not the total victory either side sought, but it was an agreement built on honor. Yet the Crusades did not end. In 1204, Christian armies turned not against Muslims, but against fellow Christians. Constantinople, the jewel of Byzantium, fell to crusaders who looted its churches, plundered its treasures, and left the great empire crippled. Later crusades stumbled into failure. The Children's Crusade ended in tragedy, thousands of innocents lost. The Fifth and Sixth failed to restore Jerusalem. By the late 13th century, the last Crusader stronghold at Acre collapsed under Muslim assault, and the dream of permanent Christian rule in the Holy Land was broken. The aftermath was grim. Battlefields lay silent, strewn with corpses, broken weapons, and abandoned banners. The glory that knights had sought dissolved into dust and memory. And yet, from the ashes of holy war came unexpected legacies. Merchants carried spices, silk, and precious metals across seas. Scholars translated works of philosophy and science, bridging the gap between civilizations. Ideas flowed as freely as goods, fueling changes that would one day ignite the Renaissance. In libraries across Europe and the Middle East, scrolls and books stood in shafts of golden light, reminders that even in war, knowledge could endure. The Crusades left scars of division, but also threads of connection. For Christians, they were a tale of lost victory. For Muslims, a story of unity against invaders. For Jews, centuries of persecution marked by suffering under both sides. Tattered banners of the cross and crescent, once symbols of bitter conflict, now stand as reminders of how faith and power can both divide and unite. In the end, the Crusades were not simply wars of religion. They were wars of faith and ambition, of greed and glory, of cruelty and compassion. They reveal the heights of human devotion and the depths of human violence. A war fought in the name of heaven, yet remembered on earth as one of the most complex struggles in history. The echoes of those battles still shape the world we live in today.